we'll share this with everybody that's here as well as everybody that registered, and then it will be shared on social media and then our other channels, our newsletters and things like that. So there'll definitely be a lot of opportunities for us to see this as well as archiving it. For our alumni, we sent out our first ever alumni newsletter back in February. I know, having talked with some alumni, they didn't find it because it went to either other or spam folders. So if you are an alumni and you're on here and you don't remember ever seeing a newsletter in February, please just go in your email and search for alumni@dellscholars.org, and you should be able to find it, and then just mark our email address safe, and hopefully future editions, it should go straight into your current inbox. We're planning one to go out in May, so that will be the next edition that will go out. And then if you are an alumni, I encourage you to join our private LinkedIn group. Just search Dell Scholars in LinkedIn and then request to join, and we'll get you into that group. And then if you're an older alumni or you just have never thought about it, we are on Facebook if you search Dell Scholars. We now also have an Instagram handle. It's @Dell Scholars Ambassadors, all one word. If you search either of those, you can join. And again, both like LinkedIn are private for scholars only. So that's kind of my bit of housekeeping. I will now do a quick introduction of Rahim, and then we will get on with the show. So yes, please enjoy, but here we go with introducing our host, and hopefully in for a fun ride here. But Rahim is a 2013 Dell Scholar and a 2017 graduate of UT Austin with a degree in finance. He is currently working as a management consultant with Accenture, and he serves as the Director of Professional Development on our Dell Scholars Alumni Board. As you can see below here, he has been spending plenty of time in quarantine working on his driving skills on Mario Kart, and has, like many of us, been rewatching a lot of The Office, I can only imagine. But with that, I will throw it to Rahim. I just wanted to ask a quick question in terms of The Office. Are you a dinner party guy? Are you a fun run guy? Are you a diversity day guy? Where do your allegiances for top episode land? Please answer, and then I will cede to you to introduce Albert, Brenda, and V.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction, Kevin. Hey, everyone. Like Kevin said, my name is Rahim. To answer your question about The Office, I am a fire drill guy. Definitely has to be my top episode. Between that and the CPR, they've just nailed it with that episode. So you heard a little bit of background about me. We've got a wonderful panel of speakers today that are going to bring some different flavors of experience and be able to share their advice with you as they went through these journeys and kind of how they were able to pick apart the pieces that were most important to them and ultimately land a job that they're proud of and that they love working in. So to kind of go with that, I'll let the speakers kind of introduce themselves as your screen comes up. If you just want to give us a quick background and maybe what your number one top advice is at this moment. So let's start off with V.
Hi guys, and thanks Rahim and Kevin and all the alumni board members who have made this webinar possible. I'm so excited to be talking to the Alumni Network and see the participants. So some quick things about me. So I'm from the 2006 cohort, so it's a while ago. Graduated from Yale in econ back in 2011, and then worked for a couple years, then went back to get my master's from the University of Chicago. And it's a joint degree in public policy and computer science. And then currently I get to do one of my dream jobs, which is to lead a data science and analytics team at QuestBridge, which is actually an organization in some ways very similar to the Dell Scholars team. So we're a scholarship organization as well. We work with low-income, high-achieving students, as well as our 42 college partners. I think in terms of hobbies and fun facts, if you guys ever get, when we get to travel again, I highly recommend Jamaica. That was not a trip that I ever sort of had on my list, but when I did that trip, it was incredible. It was the first time I saw sort of the luminescence. I'm forgetting the term. Let me remember what I'm talking. The bioluminescence. So where in the water actually glows when you're swimming in it. So it's like one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. Then I think in terms of the other things may come up as we talk. In terms of top advice, it's what I have on here, which is really try to interview your potential manager who you work directly for is going to have a major impact on your career, your next job after that, and of course your day-to-day. So that's something to definitely keep in mind in terms of thinking about what's really key for your dream job. I'll pass it to, I think, is it Brenda?
Brenda's next.
Yes.
Thank you, V. Hey guys, my name is Brenda. So I am a 2013 scholar. I originally did my bachelor's in psychology at The Ohio State University, and then I did my master's there in human resources. So I'm going to be able to give you guys a little bit of an HR perspective. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to you all. So currently I work for PepsiCo. I'm with the Frito-Lay division, and I'm on their sales side. So I sit in Somerset, New Jersey right now. So it's a little bit crazy there right now. But I'm originally from South Lake Tahoe, California. So it was a big move for me. I'm fairly new to the company. So I just started last July. I was an intern there. So it was really great experience. And that's why I came to the New Jersey office. But currently, my newest hobby would actually be brewing beer. So I recently picked that up, and it's been a lot of fun. Definitely a lot of heavy lifting in terms of how many gallons I have to make. I didn't realize that you have to make 5-gallon batches, so it's a little heavy for me. I had to get like a little step stool, but it's been a lot of fun to do during quarantine. It definitely passes the time. And in terms of interviewing advice, I would say that networking doesn't stop once you get hired. So definitely encourage you guys to network when you're at your companies, and it really pulls up like new opportunities for you, and just connecting you with the right people, finding sponsors and mentors is super important. So that's my little piece of advice for you guys. So next, I would like to introduce Albert.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elle Virtanen, and I'm from the 2012 cohort. And so I very recently got my job in December 2019. So I know the sort of interview process and applying process pretty well. I first graduated with a degree in ecology from UC San Diego in June 2016. But about my senior year, I decided that I kind of wanted to do something new. And I decided that after I graduated, I would get another degree in computer science. Which I did from Oregon State University, and I graduated in September 2018. And so for about a year, I was applying to jobs and practiced my interview skills, and finally landed a job at Hookit, which is a sports analytics company, in December 2019. And so I think that the most important piece of advice that I would have is that you shouldn't feel stuck with your current major or career. I've noticed that in a lot of people I graduated with, they've gone to completely different majors. I've known people who graduated with degrees in biology and transitioned over to working for the state government, to finance, things like that. So I think it's important to explore what you're interested in. And so I'll pass it back to Rahim.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for your quick introduction. So now that you've gotten to get to know our speakers a little bit better, we'll launch right into our discussion for today. So how do you prepare for success when you're looking for your next career option? And what are some of the things that we did that made us successful in getting jobs within our fields? So I've kind of got some questions to start off our discussion today. And then audience members, if you're hearing something that resonates with you, or you want to hear a little bit more about an experience that someone's talking about, just feel free to put it in the question and answer chat box, and we'll try to get your question answered either in the very moment, or at least we'll keep some time at the end for you to have all your questions answered. So I guess, to kind of start, job hunting 101, right? I have just graduated college, and I am now looking to get a job. I've got a degree in, it could be finance or some science degree, whatever I'm looking for. Wherever you guys were in that phase, where did you start? And very specifically, kind of how did you build your professional network, and what were the job aids or places that you went to find job postings or listings or people that were hiring? So I guess first off, Albert, do you want to take that, since you kind of just recently went through the process? How did you build your network, and where did you look for the jobs that you were applying to?
Yeah, I would say the absolute biggest tool that I used in my job search was creating a LinkedIn. And that was pretty much the first thing I did as soon as I graduated. And I used it for two purposes mainly, and they would be creating a personal network and also applying for jobs. In terms of creating a personal network, I pretty much added people who I knew from previous courses, whether it be college or high school. And it allowed me to get in contact with them in case I wanted a referral, or ask them if they had any advice, or even if they could connect me to someone else who had a role that would fit me. And in terms of applying for jobs, I think that LinkedIn is one of the best sites if you know how to search through it. And so I would use LinkedIn to apply for about 5 jobs a day, and I would use specific keywords and search Boolean terms to help me navigate through the job site.
Awesome. Brenda, V, do you guys have anything that you want to add to that? Maybe let's go Brenda and then V.
Yeah, so I would say just talking to your friends, in like you're trying to find like if your friends know other people who might be in the same industry as you, and then if they could like make that connection for you, because I can't tell you how many times where I've gotten resumes from individuals in my company who want to apply for a certain job, and then I'll make the effort to like connect them if it's an internal referral. So even if I'm not if I'm not recruiting for the position, I'll still like make an attempt to put the resume in the right hands. So definitely like reaching out to your friends or friends of friends to see if you could like make that connection in the beginning.
Yes, I think to echo on sort of on the networking piece, definitely use. It's a little funny to say here so we're the alumni network, but to use your alumni network, right? Like the ones at your campuses, but also the Dell Scholars one. Definitely find us on LinkedIn. Kevin had mentioned that group. If I was in somebody's shoes who's graduating right now, I would definitely that would be a place where I would want to have a profile and be able to navigate. The beautiful thing I think about LinkedIn that you guys have access to now is you can actually see people's career trajectories, right? And see the different posts that they've had. And maybe your dream job is not going to be the first job that you get, but you have a sense of what that is going to be in, like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and you can actually see who's currently in those positions and what were their jobs before that to set you up for it. So that was, I think, something coming from like a first gen background. It was really tough for me to understand what the career trajectory of somebody was in certain roles. So that's one. I think I'm trying to think back and anyway, so I graduated in 2011 and we were still quite at the tail end of it, but we're still in it from the 2008 great sort of recession there. And I remember it was pretty tough. So it may be part of the environment that many of you who are job searching are coming into as well. But just know, there are people hiring. So finding out, what sectors, what industries are hiring there. And then having a sense of what it is you want to have in your first job out or whatever your next gig is, I think is really crucial. What kind of skills do you want to build? What kind of skills do you want to learn from and be positioned to learn from your manager or the company that you'll be at? I think having those very clear in your mind will be very helpful in figuring out where to start the search and what are the networks and who are the people that you want to talk to. And I did a lot of cold call as I think back, through my career, just like cold emails and just introducing myself and trying to get some conversations. And I would say it can be very small things that actually have a big impact on your career trajectory as I've been reflecting on it. What took me from my DC job to Chicago was like a coffee chat with somebody who I just had literally just a 30-minute call. We didn't have any reaction, relationship after that, but it gave me information about an opportunity that was like the perfect fit for me and took me to Chicago, which then led me eventually to the Bay Area. So that's something to keep in mind and think through, sort of knowing what what you're looking for, and really leveraging any opportunity that you can get to talk to people and to learn and to make those connections.
Awesome, thank you. And just to add a little bit of my own personal experience with that, my campus resources were incredibly helpful to me. So going to UT, we had career fairs, we had companies that would come in and do information sessions. We could sign up for coffee chats to talk to their employees, and all of those things helped because throughout the entire process, they're checkboxing you. They're like, oh, this person showed up to the info session. We saw them schedule a coffee chat. We saw them show up to our networking event. So all those things really do help get that first round interview and get into the door. And also for the people at the company to get to know you well, know your face, who you are, what you bring to the table, and really kind of accelerate you in that journey of finding that job and trying to get that, at least the first interview so that you can continue on past that. So I guess kind of to ask you guys, based on what you did to get the job or where you were searching for the job, how did you decide what you wanted to do? Did you put together a list of priorities? Did you stick with what you had in your degree track and that's what dictated what kind of jobs you could get in the marketplace? And Albert, especially you with wanting to change that career trajectory there, how did you decide that that was right for you, and what were the steps that you needed to take in order to be able to do that?
Yeah, I'd say for me, the biggest change was experiencing a lot of other classes and having a sort of experience with other fields. Because I started out with a degree in biology, and for 4 years, that was pretty much all I knew. And so it wasn't until that I took a course in computer science that I was like, wow, this is a lot more fun than what I've been doing these past couple of years. And so it gave me a lot more of an idea of what to look for in a job and to maybe explore the field a bit more. And it was after taking a few more courses and talking to people who were in that field and learning about what they do on a daily basis and whether or not I would like those sort of things. That was what helped me finalize what I wanted to do in that field.
Awesome. And what about you, Brenda V? What about how did y'all kind of follow that path, and what steps did you take to kind of shape your future?
Yeah, so for me, I originally thought I wanted to be a therapist, actually. So I went to school for psychology. I did like a research assignment in psychology, and I realized I didn't really want to do clinical psychology because it would take another like 7 years of school, and at that point I wasn't ready for that. So I went to an info session for HR. So it was more for like individuals who really enjoyed working with others but didn't want to do that for like in their personal life, I guess. So more of like business. So that's what really geared me towards HR, just like going to info sessions of different fields that you could like potential like careers. So that's what geared me towards the master's program. And within my program, we did have specific companies that came to recruit for us. So they would come in our first year in our master's program. So it was a lot of like heavy recruiting fall semester to get internships, and then throughout the summer, we did our internships, and then we would get full-time offers if we really liked the company or, their values aligned with our values. So originally, I didn't know that I wanted to be at PepsiCo. I didn't know that I wanted to be at a consumer packaged goods company because I was like, oh, I don't even know if this is like the right fit for me. So I saw them at the career fair, and I don't think I made like the greatest impression because I didn't get an interview. So, but then I went to like one of their info sessions later on, and I talked to a recruiter, and they're like, oh, we have like an open spot. So I ended up talking to my interviewer the night before. So, and I had a good interview with them, and then I got my internship, and that's what led me to the full-time offer. So if I didn't go to the info session, I would have never gotten my interview spot. So just kind of food for thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting how small things can have a big impact. And I think, there was a question in the Q&A that was very similar, Rahim. I don't know if you saw when you asked your question to the question that you asked, which is, you know, what happens if you don't know what your dream job is? And you heard from Albert and Brenda, and I'm following the same area. Maybe Rahim too. I'm not sure. Although maybe he always knew he wanted to be a consultant. But it was very murky for me. Like I knew broadly I wanted to. You know, when I was graduating from college at that time, I guess I was interested in international development, but was not ready to go into the Peace Corps and go overseas. And so the closest I could get to that was in DC, working for the government. And kind of just, my path was never clear either. As you can imagine, doing work in data, in education, data science, there's no clear path. But you kind of sort of follow, you know, what do you know that you do like to do? And you heard a little bit, I think, from Brenda as well, like, oh, she knew she wanted to interact with people. And I knew I wanted something around impact. And there were certain things you were willing or didn't want to do. And so those are also very helpful. But I think just to keep heart that it's a big exploration for a lot of us in terms of the different kinds of jobs. And, you know, I think the job that I'm in now, I don't think I could even imagine it, I don't know, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago before I'm actually, or 4 or 5 years ago before I actually am in the role. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And just to, you know, have a sense of what you want in terms of, you know, the city you're in, the kind of impact you want to have, the type of skills you want to build, and what you don't want will help guide you a lot.
Yeah, and that's funny. I just opened the question and answer. I did not see that question, but it looks like we had the same mental train there, Olivia. Definitely, I think for me, that was why I went to consulting is kind of one, I followed the herd of being a business student. They either went into banking or they went consulting at UT. So I was like, do I want to do investment banking or do I want to do consulting? I think the other side of it came from, I really didn't know what field I wanted to be in. I have a passion for healthcare, but I didn't know if that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So consulting was going to give me the opportunity to work in multiple fields, do different sorts of work, kind of have the knowledge and experience in different areas. And then my plan was always to kind of figure out what I liked doing and then go industry side from there and really work for, you know, either it be a healthcare provider or payer side or do something completely different. It could have been oil and gas, it could have been banking. But it definitely gave me the most chances and opportunities to work in different things so that I could get a feel for, you know, where do I enjoy working and what kind of work do I enjoy doing, but also what kind of people I enjoy being around. I think that was also extremely important for me when I was looking at companies is what's their company culture and, you know, how do they treat their employees? Is it a cutthroat environment or is it we're helping each other for the mutual success of the company? And that was extremely important to me looking into it. I think we've got another question, a couple of questions here that are coming in. Let's see if we can take them really quickly.
Yeah, here, I can read it for you, Rahim. And I think this one maybe is geared towards Brenda. So Kenneth is asking, he said, in 2017, he was fired because of his sexual orientation from his employer in a state that didn't have LGBTQ protections. So his question was more generally, though, which I think could apply to more than just himself. How would you recommend explaining unique work histories?
Can you start the beginning of the question again? Because I don't think I heard.
Sure. So he said, in 2017, I was fired because of my sexual orientation from my employer. I live in Pennsylvania, and there are no state protections in place for LGBTQ community. How would you recommend explaining unique work histories? Which I think I would say, Brenda, if you could speak both to Kenneth's specific question, but I do think more broadly that's just a great question in general about, you know, building a resume and speaking to your career, different pathways or gaps in employment, anything like that, regardless of reason too.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that's definitely like an awful thing to be fired for. But in terms of your work history, I would say that you could go into the experiences that you felt at that company, because I don't like if that was brought up in an interview of why you were let go at that company, I would say like their values didn't align with mine, and this is the reason why I got terminated for. Because at the end of the day, you have to find a company that really aligns with your values. And if they didn't respect that and they didn't have policies in place to protect you, that's not a company that you want to work for. So I don't know if I'm getting at the question, but I would say that, yeah, you definitely have to look for a company that does have those policies in place, because we do have like policy handbooks that have those anti-discrimination policies. And I'm not sure, because I don't work for Pennsylvania, so I'm not completely sure on the laws there, but I know for New Jersey, we definitely have policies in place for that protection.
And I'll echo Brenda there, not with an HR perspective, but just from a hiring manager perspective. I think Kenneth, that's a very fair question, right? It's a question that you probably get, you should likely prepare for, because people will ask, or why did you do a certain transition? So I think it's really good that you're thinking about it. I think the only thing I would add from on top of Brenda's is just thinking about how to be, in some ways, like politically savvy about it. I think in some instances we've sort of had interviewees who speak really terribly about the company, and while we're positive that that's probably likely what happened and what their experience was, I think from an employer perspective, something that could be in the back of our minds is like, oh, would you also, is that how you would talk about us as well? So I think that's something to keep in mind. It's just like the perspective of the people in the room, and how you can share things around like, values not being aligned, and speaking it in some ways in a more neutral tone, so that you can actually just move on from it, right? Like, so that we don't spend the entire interview talking about it and to get more details, but to also to be upfront about what happened. And I would focus more also on just sort of what you learn from it as well, right? Because there's not as much that we can do about how companies or things that happen to us, why they happen, but sort of your reaction, how you handled it. I think it's something that future employers would look for, and really that's really what they're asking for when they ask about transitions too. It's like, oh, how are you thinking about this particular transition? Is this the right job for you coming in? So that's really their focus as well. So if you can speak to that, then hopefully that should help, and not sort of put sort of a drag on your interview.
Awesome. Thank you both for kind of taking that question. I know we've got a couple more. I'm going to bring up something else that we want to continue talking about with the discussion, but we'll make sure that these questions get filtered and asked throughout. Looking into kind of your pre-interview stage, so you've got your first round. How do you start preparing? And we haven't reached the interview yet, but how did you start preparing for that? Did you practice doing an interview with someone, giving an interview? Did you do research on the company? What kind of things were you looking for at that point? And in terms of figuring out the dress code and where you had to be on the day, and what kind of conversations you were willing to have with the interviewers that you were going to be meeting with. How did you prepare for all of that after hearing you had a first round interview?
For me, I think that the most important site that I used was Glassdoor. Glassdoor is a site which has a lot of job postings, but in addition to that, there are people who post their interview experiences with that company and their experiences working at that company. So I use that to sort of glean what I could expect from the interview and what it would be like sort of working at that company. And I think that when you generally have your first round interview, I don't think it's a bad thing to ask your recruiter what to expect in the interview, because there are times that that the interviewers aren't really clear of what they're expecting. So I don't think it's a bad thing to contact that recruiter again and talk to them about what to expect. And in terms of a more computer science specific sort of interview, there's always going to be interview problems that you should prepare for. So it would be important to sort of brush up on your fundamentals in that kind of thing.
So I would say that definitely do research on the company. So from a recruiter's perspective, I'll typically ask the question like, oh, why do you want to work for us? And if I get generic answers of, oh, it's a big company, or there's a lot of opportunity that I know that you haven't really done your homework on why you really want to work for us. So that's always helpful. And then also just being able to review the job description. I know that a lot of the times they will tell you exactly what they want in like the requirements section. So if they're saying that they want leadership, then I would tailor your answers to more like leadership focus. So it's really important to like just review that little section and be like, okay, these are the answers that I should be thinking about when I'm answering my questions. And then as far as like preparing for the interview, I would say that definitely practicing out loud has helped me a lot, and doing mock interviews, because at that point you will sound more polished in the interview, and words also sound a lot different in your head than when you practice out loud. So I know I would like practice with my friends, practice in the car, just really trying to understand like my thoughts, and then before I'm actually like saying it in the interview. And then as far as, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's all. I mean, I would say that reflection is definitely helpful after the interview. So typically after the interview, I would write down all my answers and then take a look at them, just so I can like reflect to see like how I could better them, or maybe like I would like think back to see like what I forgot to say, and that's really helped me like prepare for my next interview.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on top of that, other than to back Albert and Brenda. If you guys did all of those things and you can sort of like display some of that in the interview, those are the great things that we are looking for when we do the interviews. And then I think the only thing around practice is actually in many of the informational interviews that you guys can do as you're thinking about networking. Those are actually really good opportunities to practice introducing yourself and articulating what it is that you want, what it is you're looking for. So those are opportunities as well to practice.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Let's take a couple more questions. I think, Albert, this one was more towards you, and we can also keep it broader as well. But someone asked if they're a biology major, or being a biology major yourself, how were you able to land a computer programming career? Did you take any comp sci internships? What courses helped you prepare? Any advice you have for students who don't have a comp sci background? So speaking specifically to this question, but I think broader is, if you had a degree that was completely different from something else that you were pursuing, so your biology and your comp sci background, how did you make that dive into comp sci? And once you were switching, what were some of the things that helped you really grow your strength and expertise in that area, knowing that that wasn't your background or your undergraduate degree, but something that you were growing on top of your existing education? What are the things that really helped you and strengthened your education at that point?
Right. For me personally, I chose to get a secondary degree, so a second bachelor's degree in computer science. But I don't think that necessarily has to be the case, because I've known other people who self-studied and built projects in their own time and have applied for jobs and have gotten interviews. And I've also known people who've done what are boot camps, which are sort of 12-week programs that teach you computer science, and gotten jobs at really great companies as well. So I think that in a broader sense, there are a lot of different programs that you can apply for, and that help you get the job that you want. And you can even get a second degree, and in some fields you can even self-study. I would say that in general, the most important thing, that if you don't have a relevant degree, and I think especially in computer science, is to build projects with the skills that you have. Because a lot of the times you can put whatever you want on your resume, but unless you show what you've done, whoever reads your resume won't know that you can actually do it unless you can talk about it. So I would say, if you're looking to set for specifically computer science, build something with the tech stack that you want, like make a website or make an app, and then add that onto your resume to show that you can actually do things with it.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Do any of the other speakers have anything to add?
Just that what Albert says applies to, data science, data analytics, designing, like user experience design. It applies to a lot of things, because what people will ask you at the interviews is, can you give an example of something related to what we would ask you to do on an actual job? And so having those experiences that you can get in lots of different ways is a really good way to really nail the interview and get your job.
Hey, Rahim, this is Kevin. Maybe before we leave kind of the interview section here, there was a question that just came in that I thought would be good, asking about how do you kind of prep for strong questions to ask either the manager or the person that's interviewing you during your interview?
That's a really good question. Brenda or V, do you want to take that? Maybe let's start with Brenda. What are some of the good questions that you've heard, and how do people prep, or what really wows you?
I would say really trying to get an understanding of the company culture, but not necessarily asking like, how's the company culture? So I would say like do your research on the company, find things like them in the article. Like it's always important to like find them in the news, and then just seeing what they're doing around the community, because I'm always impressed by those questions, or like questions about their training and development, because typically at the end of the interview, if they don't ask me that, I'll like go into it anyway. But it's nice for them to be like, oh, like what is the career progression like? What is the training like for this? Or what is like them trying to get a better understanding of like the realistic preview of the role, because I find that some people don't know the role that they're interviewing for until they get to the job on the first day or like the first week, and then they find out they don't like it. So really trying to get a better understanding of the job is what my advice would be.
Yeah, I think those are all right. And then I think particularly on the manager, I think it's important to ask, what kind, in whatever way that you can, what is their management style, right? Like, how do they think about managing somebody? Are they thinking about the person's growth? How do they think about building their team? I like to ask really challenging questions, actually, right? Like thinking through what some of the challenges that they've experienced as they manage is really helpful. And in some sense, it's like get the worst news up front so you know what you're walking into, but trying to figure out a soft way to ask that so that they're not feeling sort of under the gun is something to think about. And then I think from the manager perspective, probably the best people to ask about somebody as a manager is the people who they manage. And so this is where like interviews with peers, like people who would be your teammates, become really helpful. And it's something that I think it's really highly underused, because you think, okay, they're peers, how can I, what information can I gain from them? But actually their experience is going to mirror what your experience will be like, since they're your peers. So thinking through how you can get really good information from them about what their experience is. And I think even in my stage of my career now, I think a lot about growth, right? Like if I invest a year, 2 years, 5 years at this company, how am I going to grow? And that's something that I think everybody should think about, whether you're starting out in your first job or, you're like 5, 10 years in, because you guys will see we continue to have to grow and expand our skill sets. So that's something to always ask and make sure that there's good opportunity for you wherever you go for that.
So in addition to kind of the questions to ask at the end, let's take a little bit to talk about the actual interview process, right? There's going to be, the resume walkthrough at the beginning. There's going to be some behavioral questions, maybe some technical questions. Can you all talk about how you prepared for those? If there was any methods that you used that really helped, and what have you seen that's worked for you in an interview to really relate to the interviewer, but also make sure that your strengths are shown and that you're talking about the right things that are related to the role. So, kind of based around the resume walkthrough process, the behavioral questions, and the technical questions, once again, how did you navigate those and how were you successful?
Yeah, for me, as I was interviewing for software engineering jobs, I would say those are primarily technical. And so a lot of interviews would pretty much be introductions and, okay, let's start solving these technical problems on this whiteboard. And so for that side of things, I think it's important to kind of review back on what you've studied on your classes. And there are a lot of sources online, such as LeetCode, that help you prepare for the technical portion. And if you want to just message me afterwards and I can talk more about it. But in a more general sense, in the resume review process, I think that they really want you to talk more about the project specifically. Because let's say you have a project on your resume and you're going to write, let's say, 4 lines about it. I think that they want to hear a lot more about it in detail and about the sort of challenges that you've encountered and how you overcame those challenges like in doing that. So I think that just being able to talk about the points on your resume is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think I would add a little bit, harking back on what Brenda has shared around just making sure you understand the job. And so, you know, using the time that you have on the interviews to get a good grounding of the job. What are the problems that people are actually really hoping that you coming in is going to solve? I think I love hearing that question and asking that question, because it actually forces people to think about you in that role, which helps you, and then also gives you a lot of clarity around what the actual job is going to be and what your responsibilities are going to be, and whether it's a really good match for you as well. So yeah, I think whatever you can to prepare to talk about your experiences, and whatever you can do to understand the role that you're applying for. And I think, you know, there's a lot of context that you may not have on the company. And, you know, what we write in job descriptions can sometimes mean different things when other people read it from different sectors. So we understand that and just try to build some clarity around that as best as you can. Brenda, would you add anything else?
Yeah, I would just add that just try to be yourself as much as possible. I mean, interviews are uncomfortable. I mean, they're not just uncomfortable for you guys interviewing, but they can sometimes be uncomfortable for us doing the interviews as well. So if you come in and I can tell that you really haven't practiced, then those are the interviews that can be uncomfortable. But if you really like practice, that's when you can get more comfortable in the environment, and that's when you can like make small talk with the interviewer, and then I can really truly see your personality and be like, oh, okay, so this is the person, that what they truly are and how they truly would be at the company. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to assess if you have the right skills. And if you don't have those skills, we can teach you those skills. But are you willing and able to learn? So that's the big piece of it. So that's all I would add.
Awesome. And kind of in my own personal experience, consulting comes with case interviews, and that was probably the hardest part of it for me. So I know I practice a lot with my friends. I practice with other interviewers. I read books on it and did some trainings online about it. In order to know the behavioral and technical questions that they're going to ask, I went to Glassdoor and looked at the jobs, and a lot of times people have listed the questions they're going to ask you there. Also, just talking to professors that have experience in those fields, and also talking to a lot of times the interviewers themselves, like, hey, what kind of questions can I expect to hear in this interview process, and you know how do I prepare for it? And sometimes they're willing to share that and really give you the leg up in the process as well. So it actually turns out to be really well, and it can help you be more successful in terms of being already prepared for those questions before they even come your way. And then the tricky part is to sound genuine and not like you've rehearsed the question a million times. So that part is also important, that you're not just a robot answering, but you really do care about giving them an honest response to the question. And I know a lot of you have probably heard the STAR method of answering those questions. And to kind of go on with this session, we do have a couple of resources that we've created. One of them being an interview handbook that kind of goes through all these things of, how do you make a resume? How do you make a cover letter? We've got some templates in there. We've got kind of the whole interview process mapped out, from how to answer behavioral questions, what kind of technical questions you should expect. How do you follow up after the interview? How do you react to certain situations? So hopefully we'll be sending out that book after, and hopefully that helps answer a lot of questions. But I think we mostly got through the content that we wanted to. We definitely have a lot more advice to share, but Kevin, I think this is good. This is a good time for us to just jump into answering as many questions as we can in kind of these last 10 minutes.
Yeah, so I'll kind of take 2 different questions here and kind of blend them together. So kind of taking a step before the interview piece. So just kind of general recommendations on building a strong resume, and then also kind of related to the resume, but how, and maybe this is, I'm not sure if this is like a technical question for Albert or not, but how would you go about putting together a portfolio of your work to kind of accompany your resume?
Yeah.
Albert always has to answer the question first, so I'll give him some time to think through it. But I think for the resume, one of the things that I think is really tough for the person who's handing the resume in to realize is that people spend they can spend a very short amount of time on your resume. So you really want to optimize. Of course, you worry and you sweat about the details, because you don't want it to be like they glance at it, they think it's interesting, they start to read it, and it's fluff, right? But you also need to really optimize for glanceability. So if, like, Brenda or I are looking at, like hundreds and hundreds of resume, we can't read every single word. So how are you going to make it and structure it and format it in a way that, like, within 5-15 seconds, we can find interest and alignment in what we're looking for in your resume is something to think about. And then I'll just say shortly on the portfolio side, and Albert can add more. It's just, as we were giving you guys advice around like all this prep work that you have to do and all this practice that you have to do, try to find a way in that's related to your interests, right? Like if you're going to have to build something, a website, or you have to do some data analysis, or you have to practice some cases, maybe do it in a sector that you're really interested in so that you can learn about that sector as well and get to kind of kill a couple birds with just one stone. Is because oftentimes it can feel like, oh man, why am I doing all this work? But it is one to learn, and then if you can tack it on to an industry or some sort of interest that you're really passionate about, then when you speak about it, it's also really going to shine and could really help you in the interviews. I'll pass it to Albert now.
Thank you. I would say the most important thing when I was creating my resume was to have it reviewed by people who were actually in that field, and to have it reviewed by multiple people, because the people in that field already know that what they're looking for. So I would have people who are employed as software engineers look at my resume and critique that and give me suggestions based off of that. And I think generally you're going to get different advice, but try and get what's the most important to you and what you want to show in your resume. I think a common advice that I got on my resume was that I was listing a bunch of things, but not really going in depth into them. So I would list like the 10 classes that I took and like 5 projects that I did. And everyone told me that it's not the quantity that's important, but the quality. And so they wanted me to sort of cut down on the number of classes that I showed, but actually said what I learned in those classes and what I did in those classes. So if I got like first place in sort of a class competition, I would put that and say what I built in that class. In addition to that, I think that people who were employed as software engineers, they would tell me that, just to be able to talk about what I have in that resume. And in terms of having a portfolio for your work, I think one of the more interesting things that interviewers have always talked to me about was my personal website. And so I created a website which allowed me to showcase my work in different ways. Because with a resume, a lot of the times it's just like verbal text of what you're actually going to do. But with a website, I was able to show like videos of what I've done and show links to my sort of code. And so it allowed me to express my creativity in that way. And so I don't think that that's just exclusive to sort of technical fields, because there are a lot of resources that allow you to create your own website, like Squarespace, where you can showcase your work. Like maybe if you're doing art, you can showcase your art there. Or if you're writings, you can showcase your sort of blog there. So I think that it would be really cool for people to create a website and showcase their work there.
Yeah, I would just add that sometimes it can be helpful to have a longer resume for yourself, and then really try to tailor the resume based on the position that you're applied for. So just having those experiences that you can look back on, and then try to tailor your resume depending on the role that you're applying for. can really help. Just when I look at a resume for like 30 seconds, I can be like, oh, okay, this person did all this stuff and that aligns with this position. And then having like results oriented bullet points are really helpful, because that's what will show me that what you've like accomplished, rather than just stating like what you've done there. So that's all I would add.
Okay, and then I think this is the last question, which is great because we'll be able to get everybody out on time here. And I know, Rahim, you kind of touched on this a little bit. So this one is from Jeff Day, and the question is about kind of a job-related test based upon the job posting. So I guess tackle that either from an actual test or, and Rahim, I know you talked about this a little, but how you prepare for kind of those case interviews or those case studies that you have to present on. How did you go about having a level of detail to kind of showcase yourself when you have either a test or a presentation within an interview?
Yeah, I can kind of start off with that. I think it adds a whole nother layer to the interview, right? Because we're kind of prepared to talk about ourselves and our experiences, but here's them testing my knowledge in the moment. I've got to keep my nerves down, and I've got to work through the problem in a way that I can frame properly, and it's more of a conversation between myself and the interviewer, so they feel like they can understand my thought process, how I'm going about it, and that we're solving the problem together, right? So that was always my notion, is that I want to seem coachable and I want to seem knowledgeable, but at the same time, I want this to be like a group effort as much as possible. And there's definitely a lot of different types of interviews that come up like that, whether it be a text, a group interview, a written case interview. And there's a lot of good resources out there. So I know when I was doing case interviews, a lot of the MBA schools actually put out case interview studies, and like MBA grad programs would do this. And I found some really helpful ones. And in fact, one of the ones I found ended up being very similar to one that I ended up getting in the interview. So just making sure that I'm practicing kind of the skills and being able to apply what I'm learning in the classroom, and also that you're practicing both qualitative and quantitative kinds, because you'll get both, right? Sometimes they really just want to know your thought process and strategy. Sometimes they want to know, can you number crunch on the spot? So a lot of different jobs do have tests that they do, and I think it's really just making sure that you understand first what they're asking for and what they're looking for, and then kind of how you prepare using the resources that are available, or your peers, and kind of the internet and Google to your help to be able to be successful there. So I hope that helps. One last question, or a question I see here from Noor is, and V, this one's directed to you, is how do you deal with job searching in an economy that is in a recession or down to a pandemic? Really quickly to talk about this, once again, we do kind of have our interview handbook that we've created to help with all of these things. And just in terms of finding jobs in the market, LinkedIn has places that are hiring. If you just go into LinkedIn, it's kind of in the right news section, and they've listed every company that's currently hiring. So that's a really good place to kind of start and see that, even in a recession, there are jobs in the marketplace and there are companies hiring. It's just a little bit harder, and we have to find different avenues of getting to it.
Yeah, I think that's right, Rahim, and I'll sort of share my piece, but Brenda and Albert, I'm sure you guys may have inputs on this as well. I would say, I think the short answer is everything that we've shared here, we really believe still applies. So that's one. The rules of engagement are still the same, but I think I would say from a personal perspective, just be kind to yourself, right? It is true that we are heading towards some tough economic times, and so many companies may be trying to be conservative, right? Because they don't want to get into a scenario where they have brought on too many people and then they have to furlough, which is not fun for anybody. So they are being conservative. So there's, in some ways, there's like less jobs or less companies that would otherwise be hiring. So just to be patient and I think just to keep balance and perspective as much as you can. There's stages where you're doing job searching, but also make sure that you're doing other things that give you sort of meaning and structure and like some wins, right? Because you may be in for some challenging times, depending on, sometimes it's luck as well. And then I think the other thing I would say, and I'm happy to talk more about this, is that there's also opportunity here, right? Like with COVID, the governments, the city governments, like so many nonprofits, they are reorienting and having to really change the way that they operate. So there's a need as well for people to come in who are very tech savvy, which, you know, for all you young people, you all are, and thinking about how that skill set is going to be helpful. So one really good example is something I've been involved in called the US Digital Response. So this is an all volunteer team, but it's like 4,500 technologists. So everybody from software engineers to product people to designers to data people who are volunteering with, I think we're at like 80 projects now across different countries, across all 50 states. And those are all really cool projects for you to learn from as well. So if there's opportunities to learn, to jump onto a project and be helpful and learn skills, I would look for those as well. And so the first job I got out of college was like an internship that then set me up for full time, like a short summer internship. So I think just being creative and just being open to learning and be kind to yourself.
Great. Well, thank you all. Rahim, why don't you sign us off? And hopefully, again, this will be the first in a series of webinars. I just, from the Dell Scholars point of view, wanted to thank everyone that attended, and especially Rahim, Elle, Brenda, and B for taking the time and lending your expertise. I love so much that this is scholars and alumni working and speaking to other scholars. So like from programmatic standpoint, I could not be happier with all of you guys and all of the information you're sharing. This is so important and what makes this community and this family of Dell Scholars so special. So thank you all so much from the very depths of Dell Scholars. And I know this is a really uncertain time for all of us. So just means a lot to myself and Allie and the program that y'all are here, and as well as everybody that made time to attend. I hope you all found it really beneficial, and I took a bunch of notes, so we'll be sure to kind of summarize and share video and everything with all those that attended as well as those that couldn't.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kevin, for that kind of wrap up. And just to add a little bit to that, you know, we've put together a couple of resources to help you out, some resume templates, cover letter templates, an interview handbook to for kind of the end-to-end process of landing a job that we'll be sharing with you, as well as we'll share our speaker profiles, and feel free to reach out to us with any particular questions you have for what we've been able to do. And most importantly, you know, we talked about growing your network here. Add us on LinkedIn. All of our LinkedIn's are on the slides we'll send out, and you know, just this is, like Kevin said, this is kind of the first step here, and this is our first webinar, but we're really looking to find what kind of resources would be helpful to you all, especially in kind of this uncertain time that we're facing. And so what are the things that you guys need? What can we help with as an organization, as an alumni network, and what are the things that we can address in future webinars or future resources that we create? So please let us know kind of your thoughts and your feelings, and thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.